Hi friends, it's me, Lauren Hope, aka Lolo of Good Girl Chronicles, blogger, motivational speaker, certified peer recovery specialist, dog mom, lover of Dwayne Johnson, and all around fabulous. As you will see, we have a guest here today, and no, I'm not talking about Boo Bear. It is Miss Christina Kimbrough. We're gonna have an amazing talk today about mental health, storytelling, and the power of friendship, all of that good jazz. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, so I wanted to interview somebody who I feel has an amazing mental health journey. See, he's ready to go. So sorry, my dog, he's not as photogenic as me. You ready to go? All right, bye, friend. So we're going to talk about those things, but first I want to introduce Christina. I've known Christina for 2 years, which is pretty incredible. She is a mental health advocate and a storyteller, and she is sparking some really powerful stories on Instagram about living in recovery, which she'll tell us more about. So welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I love this stuff. I miss you so much. I recently moved, and so you're my buddy, and I miss you. But it's nice to have these virtual dates.
Yes. So Christina, I met her in Norfolk, Virginia. I live in Suffolk, Virginia, aka Hampton Roads. She's now living in Cleveland with her grandmother. And we've been friends ever since. An amazing thing. We're taping this during the pandemic. Christina
Yeah.
and I have forged, and I think our friendship has gotten stronger in the pandemic, interestingly enough. And we have weekly FaceTime calls. So,
Yeah. I
so we thought
love that.
do this. So first off, I just want to share a little bit about how we met because I feel like I'm a very spiritual person and this was a divine meeting. I was at a networking event, primarily for Black business owners, and Christina was there, who's not one. So then I was like, okay. And I was really impressed by the fact that she was bubbly and passionate and not afraid to speak. But the thing that drew me to her was the semicolon that I saw on her wrist.
Yep.
And I was like, because I know what that symbol means. A lot of people outside of the mental health world don't know what it means. It's come to represent a lot of things. For me, it represented a point in my life where I wanted a period, but I got a comma. I survived a suicide attempt in 2014 and have been rebuilding my life since then. So when I saw that she had that, I was like, why does she have that? And I instantly had to meet with her. And so, Christina, I want to talk to you about what were your feelings that day when we met? Similar, not similar?
Yeah, so it was funny. I remember sitting there and someone had, like, everyone was going around, talking about what they do. And you said mental health advocate. And I was like, oh my goodness, yay. Because it's like, that's just like a very specific term. You know what I mean? Like, I have called myself one for a couple of years now since my diagnosis. So I was excited to like meet someone locally who I felt understood, because you can identify with having a mental illness, but like being an advocate and being open about it is amazing. And then you also said you were a speaker, so I was like drawn to that because I love to speak as well. I'm a talker. We're both talkers.
Yes, indeed. And so we went into Starbucks and had a meeting and started talking about our experiences. If you do not live with a mental illness, and if you've never been hospitalized for a mental illness, I feel like that's a very unique experience, one that can be challenging to talk about in open spaces. So to meet Christina and we were talking about it again, I know we say this so much, it made me feel like I wasn't alone. It normalized it for me. I was able to laugh at some things, which you don't always get to do. So with that being said, because we bonded over both having a mental health diagnosis, would you mind sharing a little bit of your mental health journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up, I think I've always had anxiety, but we just didn't have the words for it when I was in high school, which is ironic because it was like 2000, the early 2000s, but we weren't talking about it. So it was until I was 25, I was dating someone in the military. He went on a deployment. I lost a job and had a panic attack. I didn't know what a panic attack was. I thought I was dying, and that's pretty common. I think a lot of people have said that before. And so I thought I was having a heart attack. I didn't know. And then on top of that, I was having suicidal ideation. So if people don't know, it was more of just like wanting to die, like kind of hopeless thoughts. Because the pain was so much, it was just like, I want to be out of pain. So yeah, you talked about that. I went to the hospital for 3 days to just like a mental health ward or floor, and that was where I received my first diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder and then like major depression. And like for some people that makes them upset, but for me it was like, oh, I could breathe, because it was like finally something explained, not what was wrong with me, but like the symptoms that I was going through, because I'd had anxiety my whole life. So I got put on medicine, and then honestly, just to make a long story short, it's just been a long journey. I've had a couple we talked about this, a couple psychiatrists, a couple counselors, played with medicine, and I would say right now, like I got another diagnosis, so it turns out that I'm bipolar, so it's never linear. And I kind of want to make, as an advocate, I like to make people aware of that. Like I put this on my Instagram, you don't like take mental health medicine. It's not like a Tylenol and like, boom, your headaches and symptoms are gone,
Mm-hmm.
So I would say right now I'm doing the best that I ever have, but that's because I've taken like a holistic approach to healing. So I'm on the medicine, I'm running, I'm meditating, all of the things. So I've learned like my symptoms don't go away. I just manage them. So.
And Christina, what is your Instagram so people can follow you?
Yeah, it's Kimbrough1.
And I'm going to put that in a little lower third here so people can see that, because I do glean a lot of inspiration from your Instagram, and I want to share that with others.
Yeah.
You pointed out a powerful thing that I don't think people understand, that the treatment for mental health is not an exact science. Everybody reacts to medications and treatments differently. And so part of your journey will be different medications, different diagnoses. Also, what I don't think people understand is that mental health is a spectrum. The way one person experiences bipolar or depression, another person may not experience it that way. One of the things that I want to do with Good Girl Chronicles and the Spark of Hope Storytelling Night, which is an extension of my business, is to show people the full spectrum. Too often we see mental health displayed when it's ended up in something tragic. When someone has done something bad because they were symptomatic, or they had a not so great exchange with a police officer. But if we showed people the whole spectrum, people could have a more holistic look of what it looks like to live with a mental illness. So it was so great to bond with you over that. What also came from that first conversation with Christina was I said, listen, I want to relaunch my business with a storytelling night. There is a nonprofit called This Is My Brave. This is their shirt. That does this on a national level, and I want to do it here on a smaller scale. But I was like, I'm not really sure that people are going to come to this. And Christina, I remember you were like wearing white that day, so freaking cute. She was like, you can do this. And I'm like, I don't even know this girl. Like, you know that I can do this. So I've always wanted to hear from you. What was it about me or the idea that made you believe that a storytelling platform or show would work?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, well, first of all, I could just tell you were talented from meeting you. You're just, you're just very, like, we have some personalities, but it was just like your energy. And I knew it was like a divine meeting. I agree with that. And I think, for so long, I'd been looking personally to share my story, but I didn't have the platform to do it, right? Like, because if you're being honest, like, where else is there? There's like TED Talks, but I'm not that level. You know what I mean? We've talked about that. So, I mean, I used Instagram and Facebook, but that's like only so far of a reach. And so I just really believed in you, and then also knew that it was something that I wanted. So selfishly, it was like, oh my goodness, this is what I've been looking for. Like, I believe in what you're doing. And I was like, I think I have, like, we just were always good working together. I was like, I think I have the skill set and some ideas that can kind of help propel Good Girl Chronicles to where it needs to go.
Yeah, for people who are newer to the channel, the parent company is Good Girl Chronicles. And then this idea that Christina helped me birth turned into Spark of Hope Storytelling Night. It's so interesting that I wanted to create a platform, be every man's TED Talk, because I knew people wanted to share, but TED is like, it's like up there. And so I hosted my first storytelling night September 2018. And I was surprised then how many people came. It was in a small brewery. And then I said, well, let me just do this one more time. There was double the amount of people there. And I was like, whoa, this is something. And I just want to thank you so much for being there in the beginning. I recently watched a Rachel Hollis conference, and one of the speakers said that you are a reflection of the people that you have around you. So it's important to have friends who are ambitious, who are pouring into you, who are positive, who are pushing you. And you're one of those people that constantly pushes me. And I think it's important that we have those. So I want to say thank you for that.
I have PTSD. This right here, this able to laugh, that creative brain part she was talking about, helps me cope. It's my breaking mechanism to be able to talk.
She's sharing her journey with others. She's helping people. She's a leader.
I was born with cerebral palsy, like Lauren said, and either I made the decision a long time ago, either I'm going to let my disability have me or I'm going to have my disability.
I just got tired of being judged. I got tired of people putting me in a box and a bubble and saying who I was and what I was. So I started speaking more and standing up more for myself. And
Guess what? I had that type of adversity.
that we need to step into our own purpose. So this evening, I want to talk about the power of purpose and how it propels us forward.
I just thank all the amazing storytellers for being so pretty and bold and letting us get closer to the light. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So as the show went on, Christina decided to share her story. So why did you feel it was so important to share your lived experience in the Spark of Hope show?
Yeah, so I think part of it was just, you kind of hit on it, was just like, I wanted to share, I think one of the first ones I shared was just vulnerability and like family and how family relates. I kind of wanted to share like an unseen side of mental health, you know what I mean? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of people see me like this, you know, and they're like, what could you possibly be depressed about? You have a great husband, like good job, you know, you're so pretty. And so it was just more of like, exactly what you said. I wanted to show like a different face to mental health. Like it's not what you think, like the homeless person in the street, or you know what I mean? Like we very much so look high functioning like this. So it was just a way for me. And then honestly, it's just like a good catharsis, right? Like it's just nice to like, you know, I think another thing you touched on it, like I've been hospitalized twice. And being hospitalized comes with its own stigma, right? Because a lot of us like can, you know, we're almost okay with talking about medicine. We're okay talking about therapy, but like you tread in the water of hospitalization and people get real scared, right? Like they think of the psych ward and like white padded walls and, you know, and side note, it's not like that. You know, no one's strapped to a table. It's an actual just like hospital with nurses. But, you know, so it was just like the combination of the two. It was like a catharsis and like way to just like feel less alone, and then also kind of get that story out there. And then also I wanted to share, my husband has lived with me. And so I kind of wanted to share that too, of like, because we often don't think of the caregivers or the people that are in relationships with us, right? So, and how it like impacts us. So I kind of wanted to share that journey too, of like my husband handling it, and like we're married, and like I wanted to show like someone in a relationship with a mental illness, happily married, you know what I mean? Like that you can do it and you can have meaningful relationships. So.
No, that's so great. And you are the type of person that I want in the show, that understands the power of storytelling and feels really, who is at a place where they can share maybe these unseen parts of living with a mental illness. I believe in the power of storytelling so much as it relates to mental health and recovery. I think the mainstream public, it's a way for them to digest and learn from someone's lived experience. And then you sharing your lived experience could be the thing that lets somebody know, oh, this is okay. And maybe I'm ready to start facing and addressing that. And that's why pretty much a lot of why I do what I do. But lately, you have opened up even more, particularly on Instagram, about your sobriety journey. And so I wanted you to talk about why you decided to do that and what that has been like.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a like pivotal or big part of my recovery. So thank you for asking. Um, so yeah, it was funny. I was able to talk about mental health very well, right? Like openly and therapy, but on the side, I was dying because I was drinking in secret. I was binge drinking. It was, and for years, but that was talk about shame. That was something that I was like, I am not going there. I can talk about my hospitalization. I can talk about medicine, all the things. But secretly I was an alcoholic. I identify as an alcoholic. And so I kind of hit my own personal rock bottom and was like, you know what? Like, I feel like we don't talk about dual diagnosis enough. That's another one. Like, I feel like there's the mental health world and there's the drinking world. And a lot of times we don't talk about how they play off each other. So I just realized, I was like, this is a topic that I know. I'm 101 days sober. So that's awesome. Thank you. And so I just came out and I just shared. I was like, hey, I've been drinking and hiding this. And it goes along with exactly what your storytelling is. It was just like a relief to not have this big burden anymore of like hiding behind this, and it's funny. I was going to say, one of the other powerful things about storytelling is that it just takes away the shame and the stigma, right? So like when we live in shame, like we're quiet and we suffer, you know what I mean? Like we're only as sick as our secrets. I think that's like a saying. And so and it's been amazing. I know you've experienced this, but like ever since I opened up about that, I've had so many people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to get sober, but I'm afraid. Hey, I want to get sober. Thank you for talking about this because, I don't think it has, I'm not here to say that, addiction has more of a stigma. They both have stigmas, but I think a lot of times with addiction, we don't talk about it as much, or people aren't as open about it because we are very judgmental to those people. What I'm starting to see is we don't see it as much as a disease as mental health. And you've gone through this because you're a peer recovery specialist, and I get it. Like, so I think that was part of my wanting to talk about it, is that I believe it's a disease. And so I wanted to get that out there so more people could have compassion and, like you said, understanding of what it is. So.
Right. You know what's interesting? There was so much that I didn't understand about addiction and alcoholism until I became a peer.
Right.
A peer is someone who's in recovery from a mental illness or managing that mental illness well, or addiction. And we are taught how to help people in the recovery journeys. I initially wanted to be a mental health peer, but because of the opioid crisis, most of the money and funding are for substance use disorder peers. And I was really scared because I've never struggled with addiction. I thought, how are they going to understand me? I don't understand that experience. And I worked with a methadone program here, which was like full immersion on the realities of addiction. And it wasn't until like I saw, people whose body had become dependent on opiates, so much so that when people want to stop, that they almost can't stop because of the dope sickness. And I learned about how the mind changes when you become addicted to a substance. That's when I understood.
Yep.
But I think that I know that people like you are important because the general public doesn't have access to that information. And you sharing your story, a real person, invites people in. And I can see on your page that it's also providing a lot of comfort and inspiration to people who are on that journey too. But here's something I really want to ask you about that I struggle with. In the mental health space, we always say, you are not your mental illness. You say, I live with major depressive disorder. But in the addiction space, it's different. They say, I am an addict. Even as a peer, that is a hard thing for me to say. I don't say I work with addicts. I say I work with people struggling with substance use disorder. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because in that I can, I'm not a drug addict, so I can't speak to that, but the worlds are similar, right? And so, I think everyone's journey is different, and I'm not here to say one is right over the other. I identify as an alcoholic because for me, it's not a moral judgment. It doesn't make me bad. it doesn't bother me to say that. I'm in the modality of AA. I know that doesn't work for everybody, and I'm here to honor that. It's helped me get sober, but it kind of like it goes back to what I said earlier. When I got my diagnosis of bipolar and anxiety, it was like, oh, thank God. You know what I mean? So for me, I did an treatment program, and they identified alcoholism as a disease. And so I just kind of looked at it as like, if I had diabetes, I wouldn't be shameful of that. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be embarrassed. It's nothing to be ashamed of, right? If I had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, whatever. So to me, it was like alcoholic. I don't feel bad saying that. I'm like, oh, thank the Lord. Because I've always felt guilty. I was like, what? Like, I'd go to happy hour and go home at 2 a.m. when everyone else had left, right? Like, I was like, why can't I just have one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a disease that won't allow me to do that. So, like, the other thing is, once you know you have a disease, you can treat it.
Right.
So that, you know what I mean? So for me, but I understand there's a whole movement and wave of people that don't like to term themselves that. And I respect that. And I hold space for them. There's no right or wrong. Like it's, you may not identify it. You may not identify as an alcoholic, but you can still struggle with a drinking thing. You know, I do want to say this really quick is like, a lot of people, the term alcoholic is hard because they'll be like, that can also keep people sick because they're like, well, I'm not an alcoholic. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not that, I'm not that bad. But like, I see so many people suffer from drinking. And so I think we get caught up in the terminology and they say, I'm not an alcoholic, so I don't need help. Right.
Right.
And so you don't need to identify it. Like, I always just say, like, is alcohol impairing you from living your best life? Like, ask yourself those questions, instead of, I think it's better to ask that than say, am I an alcoholic?
Yeah, no, I agree. In the agency that I work with, we encourage, we highly encourage people to go to at least 3 recovery 12-step, meetings a week. And we have an exercise where we have people share their first step in the group, and they talk about how their addiction has made them powerless and made their life unmanageable. I do find that when the people that I work with are able to say, I am an addict, and accept that it's kind of a turning point. Some people come into that group and they're like, listen, I'm only here because my PO told me to be here.
Yeah. Right. Totally.
So I'm really glad that you answered that, because that's something I struggle with as an outsider, but hearing you say that makes me understand it more.
Yeah.
What do you think you've learned from sharing the sobriety part of your journey? Because from the discussions I've had with you, that has been more daunting than the mental health journey, because there were so many people in your life that didn't know that was something you struggled with. So what do you think you've learned in this season of life sharing about your sobriety?
I think, I don't know if it's like it's not like this huge spiritual awakening or takeaway, but I think, I've learned a lot more people are struggling than we think. I have learned, because I have had people open up to me. So I think that's why, even more so than the mental health journey. I mean, both are important, and I've loved sharing both. But yeah, sobriety has taught me, a lot more people are suffering than we think. Alcohol, I think it's like alcohol has, more deaths per year than drugs. And I'm not here, I don't want to, please no one take me that I'm saying one is more important than the other. They're both very serious. It's just that I've also learned in my sobriety that like binge drinking is normalized. So we think it's fine or normal to be drunk, like especially during COVID, you see all these videos of moms drinking their juice, to watch the kids. And I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm like an alcoholic. I've done it all probably, so it's, but I'm just saying that, those are the two things I've learned. More people struggle, and that binge drinking is just normalized. Like if you were doing meth, or if you were, taking heroin, we'd be like, oh my God, or even smoking, but have 5 or 6 drinks at happy hour and drive home.
Yeah. So. A couple of years ago when I was a TV journalist, I remember the stories coming out about like excessive mom drinking, that moms were like drinking to cope to the point where it had gotten out of control. And, you know, I definitely have seen a couple of ads recently in the pandemic, like, don't you need a drink or this or that? Like, that has become a normal tool that we market to people as a way to cope with life.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've, made it normal to day drink. We have it normal for moms to take the sippy cups to the playground, right? And so, and I think, to me, the reason that it's so important to share is because you don't get into the dirty nitty gritty, and I don't share all my dark stuff because that's not uplifting. It doesn't help. But what I'm here to do is say what you're not seeing on the flip side of that is the hangover, the DUI, the big blowout fight with your spouse, your children putting themselves to bed at night because you're passed out drunk. And these examples are all things that I've heard,
Yeah.
So we're not seeing, it's glamorized, right? So that's something I'm going through too right now, is like, there's a thing called euphoric recall where it's like warm outside now. And I'm like, oh, I miss sitting on a patio with a good beer. And so our brain as addicts goes to this place where it's like, oh my God, do you remember? And it only gives you the highlights. This really sucks. I learned this in treatment, but it gives you the highlights of everything, but you forget all the things that you went through. And I think as a society, that's what I'm saying, is like, we see the glamour of the happy hour, right? But we don't see the driving home drunk, waking up sick, throwing up, whatever, everything that goes along with drinking. So I think for me, it's just kind of like important to speak to those things, if that makes sense. So.
No, definitely. I totally agree. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm marinating on that. So I also wanted to ask if there was someone who was watching this who maybe is struggling or beginning their sobriety journey, what would you say to them?
Gosh, so I would say, interestingly enough, it depends on, your age, but it's funny. I have used Instagram as like a huge, way to connect with sober people, and and then also something called Quitlet. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like books on just quitting alcohol and drugs. So, very important early in my sobriety, like, I was actually still drinking when I read these books, but they were a huge part of my recovery. Laura Mckowen, We Are the Luckiest, and then Holly Whitaker, Quit Like a Woman. And they're both actually on Instagram, and they both run sobriety support groups. I'm actually in one of them right now called Temptest, and it's an online support community where I have access to a therapist once a week, and then I'm in a Facebook group, and like, we support each other virtually. So like, I think a huge thing that I'm seeing getting sober is like, a lot of people don't want to go to AA. So that's why I didn't say that right away. AA is always an option, but that's kind of what like everybody says, right? So certainly if you want to go to AA, like, try it. But I would say look up, Holly Whitaker, Laura Mckowen, and then another one's Jackie Bro and Carly Benson. So those are just like 4 girls who have huge followings, who do, like this week was so fun. I did a happier hour. I just Zoom, and I got some seltzer water, put it in a cute cup, and I just sat. You'll love this, Lauren. We talked about sex. We talked about sober sex.
That's awesome.
Drunk sex, And when you get a bunch of alcoholics in the room, it's just funny because we have dark senses of humor because we've been there, you know what I mean? So you kind of have to laugh at yourself. So I bring that up to say, like, the pandemic, as much as it's been a really hard and bad time, it's really interesting in the recovery space. All these awesome things have popped up. So like Laura Mckowen offers $9 a month, and you get 9 meetings a week. You get like a master class on how to stay sober. You get an access to a phone call with her a week. So it's like there's a couple of these that you can do, and like $9 a month is super affordable, because I get that. Like, I get that things are expensive. So yeah, I would say going on Instagram is like the best way. And then like for me, I actually started like a support group on Instagram of sober people, and we check in with each other once a week. So that's the other thing is, if people watching this want to DM me, that's always available too. You can't underestimate or undervalue how much reaching out to someone does. And, I want to say too, everyone's always on like a different journey in sobriety. So like, I don't want people to feel like if they want to reach out to me that you have to want to quit, right? Because everyone's got a different journey.
Oh, totally. And I'm going to get these resources from you to put in the description below.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
With and then connect with you. But I just can't thank you enough for giving your time and sharing with us. I always say that time is the most precious thing that we have in this life. And so I'm always honored when people share their time with me. So thank you.
Thank you. You're so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you do this.
Yes. So I'm going to work on editing this week, hopefully turn it around. I do one vlog a week, so it'll be out next week. And girlfriends, and I think it's time we start talking about sex. So my next interview will be with somebody who does a lot of sex work, like helping people heal sexual trauma and things of that nature. And we're going to talk about breaking soul ties.
That's awesome.
And so,
how important.
Yeah. So there is a theory, a thought that when you have sex with somebody, you form a soul tie. And sometimes people who buy into that thought can feel very condemned, and it kind of holds them back from having healthy sex lives. And so I'm going to be talking with this expert about that. But yeah, over the next couple of weeks, it is why every woman should be talking about sex. Christina was actually at this little dinner that I had where I wanted to test whether women felt safe enough talking about sex. And what was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. And it's funny because you just go there, which is awesome with these topics that we don't talk about, because even with my girlfriends, I've noticed that's a huge thing. And as close as we are, like even the married ones, the single ones, it's just something you don't talk about, right? And not even just like the physical act of sex, but like masturbation or like just I think women, we are just taught in Western culture that sex is bad, that we get nervous to talk about it. And I would love to maybe we could talk about this later, but I had a sexual diagnosis of, we'll go back and we can go into it later, but it was very shame filled with me, and I had nowhere to go. I'll just preface it to say that for me, sex was very painful. And I didn't know what that was. I thought there was something wrong with me. Right. And so it wasn't until I told my doctor that my doctor was like, I don't know what that is, and referred me and but if I had felt like I could talk about it with my girlfriends, and actually, it relates to mental health. It turns out I have anxiety. So it impacted my sexual health. Wow. Yeah. And so, cause the muscles would tighten. And so it just make any kind of penetration painful. Yeah. Because I had anxiety, but I wasn't diagnosed with it. So I had no concept. Right. So that's actually a post I want to make. I'm trying to figure out a picture for that, cause that's a little difficult. But yeah, and so that just goes to the importance of these talks is just, and it's not just for things that are going wrong, but I think normalizing talking about sex as women is super important for sexual health, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether, you've been in a relationship for 10 years, whatever. I applaud you. I think that's really
important. I grew up with a lot of shame around sex.
Oh, girl, we could do a whole episode on that. We could
do a whole bunch on that. And as I started talking about sex on this channel, I realized that a lot of women grew up that way also. But in these small, intimate spaces, when somebody was brave enough to say, "Does this ever happen to you?" and you're like, "Oh my gosh, yes."
That's what I'm saying. Same here. Yeah.
So we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, maybe we could do a part 2. I would totally do that with you. Because I grew up in purity culture. So that's a whole conversation itself. I was told I was chewed up bubble gum if I had sex before marriage. Use trash. I mean, literally, you can't make this
terrible.
Stuff up. I know. Yeah.
But I think that when we share stories, I've seen this in so many parts of my life, we all grow from the experience. 100%. Think about the smarter choices we'd all be making if we were comfortable to have a conversation, do you know? Absolutely. So that's some content we're moving towards.
I love that. Good for you. And I mean, for me, same thing. If I had someone to talk about my painful experience with, maybe I could have gotten help faster, and maybe I could have gotten a mental health diagnosis faster. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that they were related, but because there's so much shame around sex in general, like even just talking about it, it was just something that I suffered with. And honestly, this is the first time I've shared this openly with anyone. Like my husband knows, obviously, but yeah. I've never talked about it. So
yeah. All right, girlfriend, thank you so much for tuning in and participating in this. And stay tuned, ladies, because we're going to start getting real about sex. As we say here at Good Girl Chronicles, I love you. I love God more. Mwah. See you next time.